All right, welcome to Roots of Reality Experiences. I'm joined by Representative Don Bacon, who is a former U.S. Air Force Brigadier General who served for nearly 30 years before being elected to represent Nebraska's 2nd Congressional District in 2016. In Congress, he is focused on national defense, agriculture, and bipartisan cooperation. Additionally, he's received numerous awards for effectiveness, constituent service, and fostering bipartisanship. So, Representative Bacon, thanks for coming on today.
Hey, my pleasure. Thank you.
So, just to start off, how did you first get interested in politics?
Well, it started for me when Ronald Reagan ran in 1976. You were probably in junior high at that point.
Yeah.
He ran against Jerry Ford for
Okay.
the primary. Jerry Ford had taken over from Richard Nixon, been in office for about 2 years. Reagan announced a primary. All my grandparents and my mom and dad liked Reagan, and so I was 13 years old, and so I remember became an avid reader of U.S. News, World Report, human events, and I was involved in the local area for Reagan as a 13-year-old. And so I had the bug ever since. I did a lot of high school campaigns for county candidates when I was in high school. I graduated from high school at 16. I went to college. I was a young college Republican, was a opinion page editor for our paper. And I graduated at 20 and I worked for a congressman. Then I joined the Air
Yeah.
Force. But at the day I retired from the Air Force, I volunteered to help out Lee Terry, who is a 16-year incumbent. And so I did this on the day I retired. I gave a speech for a rally the day I retired. And Kevin McCarthy was there, governors, senators. And what I didn't anticipate was Lee would lose. And I would later I would later win the nomination and try to get the seat back.
Okay. Wow. Would you say politics is more or less what you expect it to be, when you were thinking about politics as a kid versus, actually becoming a politician? How different is it?
I think I was surrounded enough that I'm not totally
Okay.
surprised by much. I would say I like executive work more than I do legislating.
Okay.
And I find the legislating process more frustrating. Even though in the last 2 years, I had more bills signed into law than any other congressman on the Hill. Number one of 435. If you go back 4 years, I'm number two of 435. So I've been fairly effective. That said, it's not, I've commanded the Air Force 5 times, and leading a team is different than legislating. And
Yeah.
so I'd rather maybe be on the political side with more executive powers.
Sure. Yeah. I suppose it's a little bit easier versus, working with all these different people from different backgrounds. That gets quite complicated. But how have you managed then to be so effective at doing that? Because bipartisanship obviously is something that is, in your background, especially in a fairly historical time with political polarization today. Obviously, the U.S. has had political polarization throughout its history, but today is another major, historical era for it. How do you navigate this world?
I work on the Armed Services Committee. It's one of the most bipartisan committees in Congress. I think it is the most bipartisan out of 20 different committees there. So a lot of things that I want to get done has bipartisan support. So I think I've been blessed in that regard, but I was also very blessed with a great team. I have like a retired colonel. I've had typically 5 veterans on our team or spouses of veterans, Gold Star spouses. And so I see a really good team that has a lot of credibility with other staffers. And I think that has helped me get bills on must-pass legislation and have my bills attached. And that's where I've been really effective on the NDAA, the National Defense Authorization Bill. I typically get maybe 5 to 10 of my bills just attached to that, and they get passed verbatim. And so we've been able to work that process really well. But I feel like I support bipartisan national security measures. Most people agree with it.
Yeah.
We have credibility,
Yeah.
and then we have a great team. Our team is really good.
So what about like issues? I mean, I think national defense issues, that's something that usually Americans from different backgrounds can get behind since everyone's interest is obviously there. How do you navigate the other issues though? I mean, there's lots of culture war issues that have popped up over the last several years. And I imagine it could be difficult, whether it's working with people within your own party or the other party and trying to navigate those situations. So how do you consistently do that and not like kind of lose your mind after a while?
I try to do the right thing, and I would be the first to say good people can disagree what that is at times. But if we're all focused on trying to do what's right, normally you can maybe come up with a middle ground or a consensus position. But some things are just black and white issues that we're not going to agree on, whether it's abortion, for example,
Right.
and some other things like that. But then you try to maximize. Okay, what's the best I can get out of on those issues? And I know some people they want perfection. Folks who want perfection typically get zero. And so if
Yeah.
you can optimize your results, that's also something I try to do on there. But I see myself as a traditional conservative, a Ronald Reagan Republican. I've never changed. Unfortunately, or fortunately, depends where you sit, maybe. Many in our party have changed. They're more protectionist, more isolationist.
Yeah.
I
For
just got a
sure.
letter from my local state party saying they want us to be more pro-Russian and less pro-Ukraine. And I'm like,
Wow.
that's total bullshit. Yes,
Crazy. Oh
I'm
my
not. I'm
gosh.
not going down that path, right?
Yeah.
So, so we've had changes in the party ideology a little bit, and even the Democrats are changing.
Yeah.
Uh, I mean, I've had Democrats say, "Don, thank you for defending free trade." Bro, it's a Ronald Reagan position, but okay.
Right. So
And
everyone's all over the place a bit these days. Yeah.
so we got a jumbling of our politics today, but I try to just do what's right, and I try to do what I campaign on. I think I've been very consistent where I believe I think over the last 10 years, I've become a little more pro-labor than when I started. But I think outside of that, I've been very consistent on what I believe and what I stand for, and I try to do what I say.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I feel like that's one of the difficult things in any historical era, especially when you're working in politics, trying to find balance in that moment because there's always forces trying to pull things to the extremes, I suppose, in either party. And it seems like one of the tough things is finding the balance where people can actually work together enough to get things done and make progress. Like trying to navigate this political moment where
Uh,
there's lots of fractions within, the Republican Party, within the Democratic Party, and how do you make progress in that situation? Because I think a lot of people look at Congress today as like, oh, they're not really doing anything.
well, I think we're passing fewer legislation, maybe that's signed by the Senate and the
Right.
president. We were passing a good amount of bills out of the House. It doesn't mean you're getting them out of the Senate or Senate law. But to your point, we have this divide, and we have the party changing to some degrees. I'm not, but a
Right.
lot of the parties become more isolationist, more protectionist. And there's different ways to do this. Some people try to get under the radar, and but those guys maybe want to stay in the House for a long time. I am not. My identity is not being a House member
That's
or being a
good.
general
Yeah.
for that matter.
Yeah.
I see my identity as being Don Bacon, and rather be a Christian first, American second, and I look forward to a third career here at some point, right? I think my tact is to be honest where I disagree, vocal but not disrespectful. If that makes sense. I think
Yeah.
the president deserves respect, but I really do think that his policies have not been good for Ukraine and for Europe, our national security. I think he's hurt us with Canada, which has hurt us economically. I happen to know a lot of Canadian businesses and people are not buying American right now or doing business with Americans because of the fallout over the 51st state. I was at a gathering last night for the Constitution Day for Denmark. Great, tremendous anger with some of the comments that have been made. When the vice president said that they weren't really good allies, that hurt them. Nobody's lost more people per capita in Afghanistan than Denmark when you look at all the European countries.
Sure.
They led by example, and they are great allies, and we should treat them that way. So I think there's a place for me to speak up, to be honest, and not be. I'm not going to be a. I don't want to be just a follower where you
Right.
follow the guy that's playing the flute off the cliff. I'd rather be able to speak what I think is common sense, and I'd like to hopefully, Winston Churchill is one of my heroes. In 1932, he said Nazi Germany is our threat. And the British didn't want to hear it because of World War One and all the fatalities that they had. So he became very unpopular. They call it the wilderness years. But by 1940, he was the only guy that had credibility because he called it right. And he called it right from the beginning. And the British said, Winston Churchill was right for these last 8 years. Nazi Germany is our threat. I want to be the guy that's speaking the truth, and hopefully that makes a difference down the line.
Yeah, because I think that that's something that's incredibly important that you highlight, especially given your military leadership background. Because I think when you come from the military, I grew up in military town of Fort Leavenworth, And I know, just how impactful that is to having the ability to think independently and not get caught up in the kind of political movements that happen off and on throughout our history as a country. And being able to kind of navigate that and deal with these different, divides, and be able to keep your head on straight. And, there's always be disagreements, but people at least understanding, common sense issues like, what's in the best interest of our country as a whole when it comes to national defense. How do we get people together to work together and not feel like they have to hate each other because they're, have some political differences. So I think it's really nice that you don't identify as like, oh, politician's my identity, but rather this is just a service you're trying to provide to help the country.
Well, there is a shirts versus skins mindset right now. So if you're a shirt, you're going to follow your team no matter what, and you're going to
Yes.
beat up on the skins no matter what they do.
Yeah.
Even if they're right or if your side's wrong, it's a shirts versus skins. That's the mindset. It doesn't work. We need to be able to say there's what is right, what is truth. And I hope 90% of the time my party's on that right side, the truth side. But if it's not, I don't want to just blindly follow it. And every once in a while, the other side may be doing something right, and we shouldn't just outright oppose it just because they're the other side.
Right.
And I read a book from Rabbi Sachs. He's passed away, but he was from Great Britain, and he wrote a book called Morality. And there's a chapter in the book about the post-truth society and the Judeo-Christian society. So we were in the Judeo-Christian society where it was more important to do the right thing, and the ends don't justify the means kind of thought. But today we're in more of a post-truth society, and it's more important to win than to be right.
Yeah.
It's not a good thing.
No,
I'm
no.
not quoting him, but I see it. I see it all the time. I think what Rabbi Sachs said was true.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely seems like it's more become a game versus what's best for the country. And obviously that's not good for anyone in the long run.
Yep.
So, what would you then like say to like Americans, especially like people who are on the other aisle, Democrats or whatever, or people that are independents who, kind of look at politics in America today. They're kind of afraid for the future. Their politicians, perhaps they even scare them. And, they're not sure what to make of policies anymore in terms of how it's going to help them. How do you like kind of, promote leadership and calmness in this era and the future of, American democracy and society?
I do think we should be diverse readers. If you're only reading Twitter and following your favorite Twitter people Rex, you're going to be misinformed.
Sure.
You're going to hear the most, I would say, one-sided explanation of any issue out there. And a lot of politicians motivate their base by fear, and it's not, and it may only, a lot of times it's only half true. And so I think it's really incumbent upon us to be well-read and try to get a balanced perspective on any kind of policy out there. And I would also say good people can disagree too. We don't want to lose sight of that, but we should try to be well-rounded with our information and get more broader facts.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think that's one of the complexities when it comes to legislation in general is that there's, always going to be different ways of looking at a bill, and people are going to have different perspectives or particular aspects of the bill. Do you always try to get Democrats on with a bill? Like how do you work with Democrats? Because I think a lot of legislation over the last several years is very much, either if Republicans are in control, it's Republican mostly. If Democrats are in control, it's mostly Democrat. And the number of bills that are, fairly mixed, obviously, are harder to come by these days. And
Most
so
of the bills I have are
Yeah.
bipartisan. I work with two different groups. I'm on the Problem Solvers Caucus, which is half Republican, half Democrat. And so a lot of those people I go to and I talk to and say, hey, I got a bill on whatever. And like Salud Carvajal is we co-sponsor a lot of our legislation. Jared Golden and I, Josh Gottheimer, Chrissy Houlihan. Those are probably Brad Schneider. These are some of the main guys that, Tom Swazi. These are a lot of the guys that I work with across the aisle on things. I'm also part of the Four Country Caucus, which is all veterans, roughly half Republican, half Democrat. And we focus a little more on national security and veterans issues, maybe volunteer, service kinds of legislation. But once again, those are the folks that I call first if I need to get and I always like going in on any bill with at least one Democrat on our bill. I try going just me and another person, or 2 and 2, 3 and 3. And maybe it'll go more Republican or Democrat at some point, but at least when I drop the bill, it's typically equal Republican and Democrats when it's my legislation.
Sure. No, I mean that makes sense. I think that's the probably the ideal situation to avoid, the sort of polarizing elements of any legislation, and hopefully, more and more bipartisan legislation can be put forward and produced.
Mhm.
Just wrapping things up, then, what gives you the most hope about sort of America's future right now in a time where I think a lot of people are across the aisle are pretty worried about the future?
I'm an old school Republican, and I disagree with some of the things that have been done too. And but what President Trump was elected, and
Right.
one of the things that I know we need to do better is we need to have once again three equal branches of government. And I think the legislative branch has acquiesced too much or given away too much power to the other two branches, and I think it hurts us in that regard. What gives me optimism? I'll just be candid with you. It's my faith. I know God's in charge, and I try to study the Bible every day. I pray every day, and there are a lot of good people in Congress. There are a lot of people that mean well. They're trying hard, but I think we've been overtaken by um, sort of a culture of partisanship. Instead of we're trying to get 218 Republican votes, instead of trying to get 218 votes. And if you're just trying to get 218 Republican votes versus just trying to get 218 votes
Yeah.
in the House, we could be so much less partisan and productive if we did more things across the aisle. But I'm hoping after reconciliation that we see more of that, because reconciliation is a very partisan process to begin with. And I've been on the minority side and the majority side, and it's not pretty.
Right.
Hopefully, when we get past reconciliation, we can look at some of these things more better.
Yeah, definitely. Well, thank you. I really appreciate you coming on to share, your insight into everything going on today. And also thank you, for your work, promoting bipartisanship, because I think, regardless of what political opinions people have on different issues, at the end of the day, we can't solve our problems if we don't work together. So I appreciate you highlighting that.
Thank you. And I appreciate you having me on.